last part of the 49th chapter sounds as best I can. Shan che, wu shan chi, hu shan che, wu yi, shan chi te, shan shin che, wu shin, chi pu shin, che, wu yi, shin chi te, shin. Now perhaps you can hear with your ear that Lao Tzu, in the original Chinese, has the discipline of a solo partita by Bach. His language does not go all over the place. His language is fine-tuned, so that just the subtlest variation, the repetition, the weaving of slight variation and repetition in recursive, doubling back words gives a kind of a dynamic that the mind cannot register if it is trying to make pictures while listening. So that the Tao Te Ching in the original archaic Chinese is an absolute puzzle if you're trying to make mental pictures. It cannot be done. The language forbids it. The meaning of the syntactical structures specifically forbids it, and the content of Lao Tzu forbids it. Now, we've been talking for a number of weeks of how Western scholars and contemporary Chinese and the Confucian tradition and the Japanese mind and the New Agers all misunderstand the Tao Te Ching. It's as if you played a Mozart sonata for a disparate group of people, none of whom could read music, none of whom could perform music, and none of whom were familiar with musical structure, much less Mozart's musical structure. And you would play for them a Mozart sonata and ask them what they heard. And they would tell you, well, they heard Regency drawing rooms full of sunlight and gay people gathered and so forth. None of that is there in the music. That can be there in a mind that has an associative imagination, but it is not in the music. What is in the music is musical form. What is in Lao Tzu is the form of no form. Now, in the very beginning, in the introduction to this edition that I'm using, a great deal is made out of the term for form. They write here, the Tao is Kant's, quote, purely formal. Thus it is called Ta Chuang, the great form, and Ta Xiang, the great image. This is not true at all. Lao Tzu has nothing to do with Kant. This is a fiction of Dr. Paul Karras, a German scholar who came to the United States to teach in the Chicago area. There's nothing at all in Lao Tzu that is like Kant. Also, the Tao has nothing to do with form. It has nothing to do also with images. No matter how great the form, no matter how great the image is, that's not it. So I've been emphasizing for us the ecology of the flow of a dynamic. Don't think of what that dynamic could be. Don't try to imagine it as electricity. Don't try to mention even the association with psychic energy, with a metaphysical entity, with abstract. None of that is germane. Just let occur for your attentiveness that when a transposition happens in Tao, that which emerges because its emerging yang quality dovetails with the receding, accepting yin quality. So that in Taoism there is always this kind of movement which can be expressed by the two hands. And indeed, the classical Chinese mythical image of the Tai Chi is that it is held in the Manipura chakra area by Pan Ku, who is like the Chinese atom, and he is spinning it. But he is spinning it not by moving his arms, but by bracketing its own dynamic and showing that he understands that the most that you can do is to maintain your equilibrium while the dynamic of the Tao goes through you. Now, if you need something similar, the classic Western statement of this is in the Gospel of John, where Nicodemus asks about the Spirit, and Jesus tells him it's like the wind. Nobody knows where it came from, and nobody knows where it is gone. But its presence is here. Now let's wait for a moment. Can you stop fiddling with that? Can you just let it be? Because it's distracting. Just relax. Just sit back and relax. Because I'm trying to let something gather here. Something needs to gather. How can we gather it? In the ancient Egyptian mysteries, the hieroglyphic symbol was the Jed, D-J-E-D. And it was like a pillar that had 4 saucers at the top of it. And the Jed was a condenser of psychic energy. It's like a condenser of electromagnetic energy. The human Jed is like a condenser of the Tao, but only works when it is in absolute equilibrium. Only then does it work. If there's any fidgeting, it is not there. If there's any distraction, it is not there. And so equanimity in Tao is not the same as it is in Buddhism, where the equanimity lies in disengaging yourself from your passions. In Taoism, it's putting the passions into the exact circulation where they belong. For when they are in the exact circulation where they belong, they flow through you in such a way that they leave no trace. So the Taoist understanding of meditation from Lao Tzu is that as long as the circulation of light is wholesome, you don't have to worry about whether you have passions or not, whether they are good or not. And the whole purport of one of the chapters that we're going to take a look at today, chapter 46, is all about how the worst thing that can happen is for you to lose your equanimity to try to grab anything. Even trying to grab God's hand is absolutely wrong. Whereas the whole Western bias in the Jewish origins of the Christian tradition is that God will reach down for you and you must take his hand. In the Taoist tradition, the whole emphasis is that that hand will come through you. Don't reach for it. So chapter 46 is entitled Balancing Out Coveting. And I put two gerunds here, balancing, coveting, on the pivot of the word out. Balancing out coveting. It's like a little archaic mantra, if you like. In Homeric Greek, the name for Odysseus' wife indicated this exact quality. Her name is Penelope. So that her name is the one who weaves and unweaves. She makes and she unmakes. And her value is not that she makes or what she makes, or that she unmakes and what she unmakes, but that she does both. She is capacious, she can do both. And that the appreciation of Penelope is very rare. Only Odysseus can appreciate her really. The 105 suitors want her for various reasons. None of them see her as she is. The same thing in the Tao. Very similar quality in the Tao. That our equanimity is what is completely natural in a harmonious way with Tao. But we're not balancing ourselves with Tao. Lean back. Just take it easy. Just relax. Let me do the work. Don't fidget. Don't be distracted. Because what I'm talking about is going to move faster than my language. My language is only like a little bubble trail of what spiritually I'm manifesting for. Just let that manifest. Don't get distracted with images or events or occurrences. Here's how the 46th chapter, balancing out coveting. Balancing out coveting. This world has Tao. Train racehorses for plowing. This world has not Tao. War horses are foaled commonly. Now we're familiar with this kind of parallelism from ancient Near East poetry, religious writing, all the way back to Samaria, all the way through all of the Semitic languages. The first line gives an indication, the second line gives a slight variation on that indication. What is important is not to pay attention to either line, but to let both lines occur together like a tuning fork. When both of these lines occur together like a tuning fork, there is a tone of harmony sounded by that tuning fork. It's like a gestalt in the mind. And what the gestalt is in the mind is not any image, but the harmonious balance of the tuning fork. So the first prong of the tuning fork is, this world has Tao, train racehorses for plowing. This world has not Tao, war horses are foaled commonly. Now that's the tuning fork. Here comes then the indication of where the harmony is not. Where the harmony is not is someone trying to balance in between these two, trying to figure out where between these two, what calibration. So there are three lines that fit into this tuning fork, and the three lines are this. Of transgressions, none is greater than to covet. Of misfortunes, none is greater than no knowing equanimity. Of calamity, none is greater than coveting power. So these are three levels of not being able to find the harmony. On the first, it's that we don't get it. And so coveting applies to anything whatsoever. Trying to hear a little better in the moment is a coveting action. Trying to get comfortable so you can hear it more is a form of coveting. So it isn't just this unsubtle, aggressive coveting. I want, I need, you owe. But it's also this subtle quality. And the most subtle of all is the way in which the ego has to restate for itself all the time in its own language what someone else has said. So that we have a radio in our minds which constantly speaks only the language that we know, and we translate what someone else says all the time into our own ego talk. Of transgressions, none is greater than to covet. Of misfortunes, none is greater than no knowing equanimity. Of calamities, none is greater than coveting power. So these three levels, the first line about transgressions is like an inner quality of the person. Of misfortunes is like the inner and outer whole persons. And the third line is the relationship of that whole person to history, to culture, to the civilization. The coveting of power has a resonance corresponding in the not knowing of equanimity. And both of those have a correspondence in the transgression within. Jesus says, even the thought in the mind is already the sin. This second section of the 46th chapter, balancing out coveting, indicates that if we correct the inner transgression, there will be no corresponding not knowing equanimity. Or as Lao Tzu indicates, it's not so much not knowing, but no knowing. No knowing. Bu is no. Not the wu of not, but the bu. Not. Bu chi. Not knowing. If we do not know, how do we not know? Not in a causal way. It's not the inner transgression causes the not knowing, but the inner transgression puts us out of balance so that the no knowing equanimity is always going to occur. It's like a balance that is off balance, and so every time you try to find a balance, you can only deal with this kind. The Canadians have the word wonky. This wonky quality of never quite getting balanced. And that has a correspondence in the world with grasping for power. Because the coveting of power always, always, always has to do with the perception or the intuition or the supposition that you're lacking and therefore you need this or you need that. You need this Jim Crack staff in order to get your ideas across. Whereas in Lao Tzu, all of this is a part of the confusion and the disorder that comes indicated here at the end of chapter 46. Therefore, knowing equanimity itself's equanimity is eternal equanimity. Now here again, Lao Tzu puts an exponential. It's not only allowing for your equanimity to occur, but when your equanimity has its equanimity occurring, then eternal equanimity has happened. Notice here that there is no causal connection. My making myself equanimous does not cause then my equanimity's equanimity, but rather my equanimity makes a space where some deeper equanimity comes and participates with mine. And that deeper equanimity that participates with mine, resonates with it, makes a consonance which is eternal. In other words, it's a discovery. It's not a making, but it's an uncovering. When my equanimity occurs, it discovers equanimity itself. And that is the eternal equanimity. So that the 46th chapter, balancing out coveting, in my translation, reads like this. This world has Tao. Train race horses for plowing. This world has no Tao. War horses are foaled commonly. Of transgressions none is greater than to covet. Of misfortunes none is greater than no knowing equanimity. Of calamity none is greater than coveting power. Therefore, knowing equanimity itself, equanimity, is eternal equanimity. Now, chapter 46 has this kind of quality to it. Now, chapter 47, when it comes into our attention, notice that it's going to arrive because chapter 46 allows the next chapter to arrive. So always there's this kind of exchange of places. That chapter 46 always occurs where chapter 46 is occurring. But our attention now is going to transform to where chapter 47 is always occurring. But from the perspective of our attention, it's that 46 fades and 47 comes into play. Whereas in actuality, we could just as well see our attention moving, so that we could see that I look from chapter 46 to chapter 47. But if I just look in a worldly way from 46 to 47, I think that I'm the link. My eyes are the link. My seeing is the link. And that 47 follows 46 because of my causal linking. This is a subtle but pervasive ploy of the ego to dominate. And it's not true at all. what happens is that chapter 47, when it comes into exchange with chapter 46, has for its subject this very point, this very content, which I have just delivered to you. The title of chapter 47 is Seeing Distance. Notice that when you go to look at something, your vision stops at a thing. Your eye makes an image of the thing. Your mind interprets then that image. Well, not even that image, but just the neuroelectric impulses that go to make up that image. The mental image is very sophisticated diamond vision. But one can train oneself to decompose the gestalt so that you can see. The ancient Buddhist training was always to take novices to the graveyard to watch the various levels of decomposition of bodies. And at first they're told all things are impermanent, and they think you're talking about human bodies. After a while, they learn that all things are impermanent because the gestalts that the mind makes on an image base can all be reversed and be dissolved. The digitalization works both ways. Seeing distance is not looking at things, but seeing spatiality. And so distance here, the phrase in the Chinese which Lao Tzu uses, is this. Qian Yuan, seeing distance. He will use this very character, Yuan, later on, where he will have a character just before it, mi, which means more, in the sense of more and more. Mi Yuan. And then he will have a character which is pronounced chi, and then he will have another character which is also chi but pronounced in a different way, instead of chi. And then he will have mi xiao. So the phrase will be mi yuan chi mi xiao. And it means more and more to the distance, one's knowledge more and more grows little. And there is a kind of a play here, kind of a play on words, like a little playfulness on Lao Tzu's part. He's saying that in worldly ways, the more one looks distantly, the more things look littler and littler. But what he means to say is the more that they diminish in terms of their presentational, correspondent resonance. So the translation of chapter 47, Seeing Distance, is as follows. Not going through doorways knows this world. Not looking through window ways sights heavens down. For one who must go out, increasing distance for that one, his knowing increases littleness. Therefore the spiritual gem doesn't go those ways, yet knows, doesn't stare, yet names, doesn't force, yet completes. Now you can see, I'm trying in my translation to always convey Lao Tzu as he would, were he speaking the kind of English, were he able to sit here and speak with us. This cadence of 47 comes up because of the quality of 46. And it's not that 46 causes 47, but that the movement between the two is extremely choreographic. So that balancing out coveting, seeing distance, there's this kind of equality here. If we balance out coveting, our seeingness becomes spatial. We stop looking to see things. If I have equanimity, if I have real equanimity occurring, I'm not looking to see things at all. I'm looking in the distance quality. So here's how 46 and 47 read when they occur together. This world has down, train racehorses for plowing. This world has not down, war horses are foaled commonly. Of transgressions none is greater than to covet. Of misfortunes none is greater than no knowing equanimity. Of calamity none is greater than coveting power. Therefore knowing equanimity itself's equanimity is eternal equanimity. Not going through doorways knows this world. Not looking through window ways sights heavens down. For one who must go out, increasing distance for that one, his knowing increases littleness. Therefore the spiritual gem doesn't go those ways, yet knows, doesn't stare, yet names, doesn't force, yet completes. Now as 47 is displaced by 48, the forgetting knowledge comes into play. The forgetting knowledge. Busy learning daily gains, busy Tao daily diminishes. Diminishing itself again diminishes. Thus occurs the not busy. Not busy, yet not no business. To do this world eternally, thereby the not marketplace. When using the marketplace, not defining thereby to do this world. Now, notice how Lao Tzu's diction, not his rhetoric, is not a rhetorical framing of phrase so much, although in my declamation that probably comes to your attention first. But the diction of Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching is always curt to the would-be clever ego that's trying to fictionalize what he's saying in its own terms, trying to chew up his language with its ear. And so Lao Tzu, like good movement artist, is constantly not allowing that to happen. Now when I was younger, I used to think that a good example of this was like a samurai with language who cuts up the phony gestalt that you're trying to make in your mind. And that's because when I was younger, I was acquainted with this through Basho, and Basho's haiku does just that. But Lao Tzu is 2,000 years before Basho. And he's Chinese, not Japanese. And he's Taoist, not Zen. And he's an enormously capable dragon. What Lao Tzu is doing here can maybe be approached by a statement that Pablo Neruda once wrote after he received the Nobel Prize for Literature. He said he was surprised that anyone in his own generation, in his own time, could understand what he was writing, because all his life he had been writing so as to slip away from any kind of critical places that appreciation could grab onto, because he wanted his poems to be free. And that he used a surrealistic quality of structure so that there would be not much there for critics to pounce on, to digest, to chew up. Not much meat for term papers to be written on, PhDs to be founded on, critical studies to be generated. Lao Tzu's like that. Only instead of being a top writer, a great poet like Pablo Neruda, Lao Tzu is one of the greatest of all wisdom spirits on this planet. He's like an ocean of capacity, beyond just being a great poet. Lao Tzu is as sophisticated as spirits become, because on this level they are eternal. The culture, the time, doesn't make any difference whatsoever. We can, in our presencing, in our deeper than appreciation, in our presencing, tune ourselves to Lao Tzu. That's what the Tao Te Ching is all about. It is a resonance. It's a pitch of eternity, which is sounded so that we can tune ourselves. What in us tunes to it? Our Jen. Our Jen. The Tao Te Ching is, in a way, a very interesting kind of example. It's not just a book which would then be in the fourth of the five-phase cycle. Or if it were a lesser book, it would be in the fifth phase, it would be one of the 10,000 things. Most of the books in this room are in the 10,000 things phase. They're end products. Occasionally, there are some books that are seminal, that are in the fourth phase, that generate these other books. But the Tao Te Ching is in the first phase. The Tao Te Ching is where the Tao is. Why is this so? Because Lao Tzu has not ever allowed it to be co-opted into just the symbolic or into just the expressive. He has allowed for the Tao Te Ching to circulate all the way back to the Tao. And so its net effect is that the Tao Te Ching is made to disappear from your mind. So the more that you try to make pictures in your mind, images in your mind, ideas in your mind, the farther you get away from the Tao Te Ching. And the more you get immersed in the tar baby of your own speculations. The more you don't hear the musical form, but you remember that you heard something that generated associations. Oh, Lao Tzu is so mysterious. Well, he's not mysterious at all. And that's the magnificence, in a pure way, is that there is nothing mysterious about Lao Tzu at all. He is like fresh water and pure sunshine. He circulates without leaving a trace. Now later on in the Ming Dynasty, in what was the late 1600s, late 17th century, when the Ming Dynasty came into play, it replaced a whole era where China had been dominated by the Mongols. And the character from Ming for that dynasty means bright. It was like a renaissance. It was like the Chinese Enlightenment. And they went back to the most powerful thinkers of the 1500s, like Wang Yang Ming. that I introduced last week. And their whole understanding was that there must be some circulation of the Tao within the body, and out of this comes the secret of the golden flower. The circulation of the light within the human body becomes an imagery of the circulation of the Tao. And in just this way, the Ming assured themselves that they knew, and in just this way, the Ming set up the wrong resonance of knowing very clearly what your mind has in terms of ideas and pictures, and not understanding the Tao. And so increasingly, the Ming dynasty, instead of becoming a resonant quality like the Tang or the Sung, led to its own displacement by what complemented it, which was domination again by a foreign mentality, the Manchu dynasty, the Ching. So that the Ming, instead of returning China to the Tao, returned it back to a foreign tyranny. Back to another tribe, another version of the Mongols. And it's Ming Taoism that dominates the so-called Taoists of the 20th century. They have all of this coveting of the physiological flow of images. God, our bodies are going to glow like transcendent flames. We're going to be so healthy, we're going to exude exclamation marks into the sunset. All of that is irrelevant. It has nothing to do with Tao at all. It has nothing to do with Manzi. So that the 49th chapter, which comes in to exchange places with the 48th chapter, which was forgetting knowledge, or as I put the article in, the forgetting knowledge. It's wise to know how to turn off the radio in your head. It's wise to know how to stop the image flow. It's wise to know how to let the ideas stay on our tabletop and walk away from them. It's wise to know how to take the insignias of office off. The paper with letterheads laid down. Because if you cannot do these simple things, what do you think is going to happen? With all of the clutter that you keep on much subtler levels, it has to also be set down. So the forgetting knowledge is displaced by an interchange choreography, and chapter 49 comes up, trust te. Trust te. Knowledge is excellent, and part of really excellent knowledge is letting it be. And then when you can do that, trust te comes up, the 49th chapter. Here's in my translation how the 49th chapter comes into play. Let me do the 48th chapter, and then I'll bring the 49th in, and we'll take a break. Busy learning daily gains, busy Tao daily diminishes. Diminishing itself again diminishes. Thus occurs the not busy. Not busy, yet not no business. To do this world eternally, thereby the not marketplace. When using the marketplace, not defining thereby to do this world. Spiritual gem, not eternally heart. In 100 hearts, togetherness, heart, busy heart. Exact ones are exactly their selves. Non-exact ones are also exactly themselves. Te is exact. Heartful ones are heartfully theirselves. Non-heartful ones are heartfully themselves. Te is heartful. Spiritual Jen lives in this world cautiously busy in this world. Universality itself's heart. The 100 hearts all direct to him their ears, eyes. Spiritual Jen, all childlike to them. Let's take a little break. Dr. Paul Karas's introduction. He's had a long discussion about how Tao is like Logos. And Tao is not like Logos at all. It has nothing to do with Logos. When Jesus wants to specify as accurately as he can, he does not say Logos, but he uses a Greek phrase which translates as good news. Literally it means in Greek, good tidings. Agathe in Greek means tidings. It's like something new, something fresh. Agalea agape, good news, good tidings, not logos. Tao, one never can hear, you can only participate with the flow of it. What you can hear, the good news in Taoism, is that Te is obviously whole and operative. And if Te is whole and operative, you know that Tao has flowed through it. When Tao flows through Te, where does it go? It occurs in us then. Our equanimity confirms to us that we're resonant with Tao and that Te is working just as it should because it allows Tao to come through 100% so that our Jen is 100% equanimity. So grandfather phasing. It's not that Te causes our equanimity. We don't have equanimity because oneness exists in the universe. The oneness that exists in the universe is not just the idea of one. The Hermetic treatises say, more primordial than the one. God is more primordial than the one. What is more primordial than the one? You cannot say. But you can specifically not say. You can know consciously and convey to someone else that of this I do not say. And because I specifically do not say, we can go on from there with confidence. Now if you hear this in a certain light, it's paradoxical. And so people say Lao Tzu is full of paradox. He's not full of paradox at all. He's full of consonance. So that when we understand Lao Tzu, what occurs in us is the consonance. And the classic Chinese phrase is that a place wherein this consonance is occurring is a harmonious hall. Or later on, because of the Ming need to have some kind of image of it, it's called the hall of the harmonious wind. When it isn't wind at all. It's down. But even if you can get to the Ming facetiousness, that's still a great step. Hall of harmonious wind. What kind of wind? A wind of the real, which is not a wind at all, which allows for the equanimity which we ourselves know is now happening is consonant with Tao. And the only way that that can happen is that Te, oneness, has allowed for Tao to come completely whole through to us. So that we allow Tao to not only come completely through to us, we do not intercept it in any way. We do not modify it in any way. We do not reflect it in any way. We do not bifurcate it. We do not refine it in any way. We let it pass through us also, and that's the equanimity. We don't touch it. We don't inspect it very subtly with an astral body and say, my God, how beautiful, speak to me. None of that. We let it occur, and our equanimity is the surety that it's occurred. So that just as the Te, we can really trust what our mind has in it, in our equanimity we can likewise trust. Whatever ideas, whatever thoughts, whatever images are in that mind are fertile, they're real, they really can do things. They're not speculations, they're not metaphysics, they are actuality. They are the emerging seeds out of which the real world will come. And as long as we inhabit our equanimity, the Te and the I, the symbols, will both be fertile, and they will have a correspondence between them. And our thoughts will have the amperage of Te in them. Each and every thought will have all of the amperage that exists in Te. Now, if you can imagine somebody who tries to train themselves, it used to be 40 years ago with Dale Carnegie, and now it's with this or that guru, that you're going to have powerful thoughts. They would be completely speechless to realize what a powerful thought really is. It has all the verve of the whole universe. It has all of the scintillation of the real. Such a thought has a virility and potency to really bring manifestation out in this world. The world of the 10,000 things loves to nourish these symbols, these thoughts. But because there are so few, they are so rare. When a symbol like the Tao in Lao-Tzu comes through, it's fertile forever. It doesn't matter that it's 2,500 years ago at all. The Tao in 1992 is as fertile an idea as it was 500 BC. It's as fertile in Los Angeles as it was outside of Loyang. Geography, time, culture, circumstance make absolutely no difference. Why? Because these ideas are eternal. These symbols are eternal. And the mind which is consonant with these ideas, which is harmonious with these symbols, is also eternal. Is eternal. Discovers its eternal quality. You can see how the discussion here that I'm going to read to you, a discussion of just two little sentences, veers off and keeps veering off and slices not only off this fairway, but off the whole golf course and finally off the map. This is typical academic jargon of someone who doesn't practice. The old phrase when I was in university was those that can do and those who can't teach. The Tao is Kant's purely formal. Thus it is called Ta Chuang, the great form, and Ta Xiang, the great image. Other expressions of a similar significance are liao, vacancy, or a condition of not being occupied. Qi, noiselessness, or a void of activity. It is the absolute, whose essence is not being concrete, but abstract law. To characterize the former, the absence of all the concrete reality, it is called wu, or the non-existent. To characterize the latter, the abstractness of this highest of all generalizations, it is called chung, hollowness, or shu, emptiness, or the void. As the ultimate ground of existence, it is called xuan, abyss, an expression which reminds one of the Neoplatonic Butos and the Urgrund of German mystics. The terms chuang, form, and xiang, image, are commonly used to denote material or concrete forms, but Lao Tzu means pure form, which is his paradoxical mode of speaking, expressed in the terms wu chuang, qi chuang, the form of the formless, or wu xiang, qi xiang, the image of that which has no image, i.e. no concrete shape. In a word, the form of the formless means the ideal, the abstract, the universal. It's like a very expensive spiel. It's like a very learned salesman who can really show you the spit and polish, the sizzle, the glisten, and God, don't you want to buy? But wait a minute. The whole impulse to want something, to covet, to want to buy, is already an indication that the process is focus. Does the Tao need a salesman? I don't think so. Who's selling the franchises? Where's the product? Are you going to guarantee it? The whole shebang, as we say in the Western United States, is bogus. And yet, there are writers, there are teachers, there are gurus, there are Zen teachers parading as Taoist masters all over the place. The landscape is crawling with them. It's all bogus. That is to say, the activity on every level is false. It's all illusion. And to give any credence to it is to be immersed, drowned in delusion. Let's come back just to the Tao Te Ching. And let's try something. Let's come back to chapter 42. And let's just listen to the flow of Lao Tzu in the translation which I've been able to present to you. I'll do chapter 42, then I'll skip a chapter and do chapter 44, then I'll skip a chapter and I'll do 46. If we're doing this in the right way, you will be able to pick up. It'll be like following an energy sine wave. Now you can follow the whole wave, or you can follow just the peaks or the valleys of the wave and still have the whole wave. So that a really accurate translation of Lao Tzu will be able to carry itself in just this way. This, incidentally, is a technique that is characteristic of all really great writing. One of the best examples of great prose writing in the English language is Bertrand Russell's little book, Authority in the Individual. You can read the topic sentence of every paragraph of that book, and you can get the gist of what that whole book is about. Because Russell was a very great writer. He was a master of English style. We never think of him much in this country as that, but he really was. And by the time he was in his mid-90s, he was a very wise human being, indeed. Okay, here's the Tao Te Ching, chapter 42, chapter 44, chapter 46, chapter 48, and 49. 42, 44, 46, 48, 49. We're going to take 5 chapters, and we're going to let a 5-phase energy cycle flow through these selected cadence. If what I have said about Lao Tzu not being a rhetorical genius, but letting his language disappear constantly back into the Tao, this form will also then be constant. Let's try it and just see it. Let's see what happens. Tao produces unity. Unity produces duality. Duality produces trinity. Trinity produces the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things bear yin to embrace yang. Immaterial qi thereby makes harmony. Zhen itself, which detested, is exactly orphaned, widowed, unrelated. Yet kings and lords thereby exact it for the honorific. So sometimes you lose itself but gain, sometimes you gain itself but lose. Zhen itself, which taught, I also teach itself. The strong and aggressive ones resonate their death. Not I shall thus convey teaching's foundation. Name and person, which is nearer. Person and treasure, which is more. Resonance and absence, which is painful. Extreme fondness, forced, is a great waste. Excessive courting forces intense absence. Knowing consonance, nothing despised. Knowing self, nothing endangered. Enabled thereby to last, to continue. The world has Tao. Train racehorses for thought. This world has not Tao. War horses are full of economy. Of transgressions, none is greater than to covet. Of misfortunes, none is greater than no knowing equanimity. Of calamity, none is greater than coveting power. Therefore, knowing equanimity itself's equanimity is eternal equanimity. Busy learning daily gains, busy Tao daily diminishes. Diminishing itself again diminishes. Thus occurs the not busy. Not busy, yet not no business. To do this world eternally, thereby the not marketplace. When using the marketplace, not defining thereby to do this world. Spiritual gem, not eternally heart. In 100 hearts, together's heart, busy heart. Exact ones are exactly themselves. Non-exact ones are also exactly themselves. Te is exact. Heartful ones are heartfully themselves. Non-heartful ones are heartfully themselves. Te is heartful. Spiritual gem lives in this world cautiously. Cautiously busy in this world. Universality itself's heart. 100 hearts, all direct to him. Their ears, eyes. Spiritual gem, all childlike to them. I want to try something for next week, and so let me give you a little assignment. The first chapter that we'll do next week is chapter 50. The title, Hui Shang, it translates as esteem life. That is to say, trust te, esteem life. The forgetting knowledge, trust te, esteem life. There's a flow, but it's not a causal flow. It's an interchange flow. And I want you to take chapter 50 in at least three different translations and line them up so that you can write out the first translation, then the second translation underneath it, then the third translation underneath it, so that you can graphically and visually for yourself see what a wobble, what a blur, what an unstable quality of language exists in the translations. There's no flowing cadence of the real. And then we'll bring my translation in, and we'll start with 50. And you should by this time be able to taste the difference. The difference between someone who speaks it like a bell sounding from someone who is playing with trying to get the meaning correct, trying to get the language tailored just so. Where the flow of a bell is just to ring the bell. Every sound from that bell is bells. It's a whole different way. When you're thinking to yourself, try to disengage your imagination. Try to let your imagination, not to go fallow, but don't use it. Pretend that the imagination has sticky hands and you don't want to smudge what you're having in your mind. So don't use the sticky hands of imagination. And you will see that if you don't use the sticky hands of imagination, the images don't stay where they are in the mind. So that usually when people train themselves for visualization, what they're doing is they're curtailing the imagination. When the imagination is free, when it's wild, it plays with images. It doesn't keep images where they are, like good soldiers all lined up. It plays. Imagination has a childlike playing nature. And when imagination is left to just play, the mind, all by itself, like a mature adult, lets the childlike imagination play wherever it will. Because it's at home in this very large house, whatever it messes up in playing with the images is not going to bother anything. But the inner, mature mind must look up from watching the child, the wild child of imagination play, look up to see the space which is unaffected by the play of imagination. And when you do this, when you have this quality, you will see that the mind which you have been relying upon to live your personal life is a little tiny corner in a room that has no ceiling, and outside of which is an enormous starry landscape. And that's just the view from one pivot. This quality is there, nascently, all through the Tao Te Ching. Try it with chapter 50 and we'll see. One last thing. When we talk about exchange or interchanging, Remember that the Tai Chi has a small circle of light in the teardrop of the dark, and a small circle of the light in the opposite teardrop. Those two circles are fire and water in terms of natural imagery. But they are the exchange quality of the Tao. That is to say, the Tai Chi always has them. Now sometimes you will see, like in modern, say, Korean advertising, you'll see the yin-yang without the little circles in there. It's completely wrong. It's like somebody doing the hermetic caduceus with one snake, with one serpent. That's not at all. Do you think that life, which works on the double helix, will allow for a single helix to do the work of a double helix? Not at all. Not even one cell. Not even one cell can be real on that basis. It's the same way here. In the Tao, all of the phases are occurring all of the time. The only way in which we can speak discursively of there being succeeding phases is for us to identify ourselves with the flow through. This identity process allows for an equivocation. Equivocation is not at all synonymous with equanimity. And likewise, in a logical way, identity is not at all displaceable for realization. The best that identity can do is to quantify a tautological state of dead end. That's the best. But in realization, there is this displacing, this interchanging quality, always operative. Now in the Tao, what interchanges is yin-yang. Yin-yang, constantly interchanging. Constantly interchanging. Their nature is to interchange with each other constantly. Their constant interchange is so much the tapestry of all movement and all stillness that they cannot be disengaged from each other except by very, very powerful symbols like the Tai Chi is the only way. So that the Tai Chi as a very powerful symbol is the projective origin. It's the seed out of which is projected the unbroken and the broken lines that make up the trigrams. The unbroken and the broken lines that make up the trigrams are like resonant images which are synthesized in their harmony by the symbol of the Tai Chi. So that a symbol in its harmonious resonance keeps the images in their particular gestalt. Now one can say from an ignorant worldly standpoint that this is then a form. But Lao Tzu says that this is not form, nor is it not non-form. It's a consonance which is characteristic of the Tao. So that in Taoism, this quality of yin-yang exchanging themselves constantly. They exchange themselves not only at the end of their permutation, at the end of their development, but also exactly in the middle. And because the end is indistinguishable from the beginning, yin-yang exchange themselves at the beginning, at the middle, and at the end. So that whatever forms we're using, if we use them in a worldly way, we seal them off from the circulation of meaningfulness at their beginnings, at their middle, and at their end. Now, in the Greek, the term which is used for a language which talks about the beginning, the middle, and the end is mythos, myth, story. It's too much. Let's come back next week. Let's think about myth. Let's think about what could be real beyond myth.